Now watching the trot from behind, again we can see more of his barrel on the left side. The pelvis though is more stable, doesn't have as much that swinging and rocking motion, although it still swings a little bit to the right. The tail is held to the left, and the hind limbs are paddling uh, backwards and out. And when they come forward, they both step towards the midline. So they backwards they abduct and probably internally rotate, and when they step forwards, they both step towards the midline, and the horse looks like it's paddling. Then, if we look further down at the hocks, we can't really see that accessory movement that we were seeing at the walk. The hocks, the left hock seems more stable, whereas the right one, you can see a little bit of a jarring motion. But if we look further down at the fetlocks, the right one sinks more than the left. And this overextension of the right fetlock might mean that there is a suspensory ligament dysmitis or injury. Now, when we see him trotting from the front, we can actually see that his barrel is swinging from side to side equally, and we can see it on both sides. His neck has a slight right side bending, and what we can notice is that when that right hind is on the ground, his head tilts rhythmically to the right. Now the shoulders appear equal, and they appear to move equally, but again, we can see the higher concussion when the right forelimb is on the ground. And we can also see that the right carpus moves higher to compensate for the reduced movement in the right shoulder. And even from the front, we can see the hind limbs paddling out on both sides, and we're able to see them from the front. Now, on the trot from the left side, things start to appear worse than in the previous gaits, or when we saw the horse from the front and the back, because from the side you can clearly see that this horse is quite stiff on the back and probably lame on the right hind. But let's take things one by one and look at the horse with a system. So we'll start from the neck. The neck is held high but looks quite stiff, and so is the thoracic spine, and it is as if the horse braces his back and his neck at the same time. Now the thoracic and lumbar spine seem to tense up when the diagonal of the right hind and left fore are on the ground. And what we thought as tension and concussion coming from the left shoulder might actually be the lameness of the right hind. Now we can see that the lumbar spine and the lumbosacral junction makes side bending and rotational movements, but it doesn't flex and extend. It's held rigid and compensates for the lack of flexion with the side bending and rotational movements. Going to the forelimb, we can see again that the left scapula doesn't absorb the shock and the concussion as it's supposed to be, and this leads to stiffness of the thoracic spine and left rotation of the spine. The carpus and distal limb make bigger movements, probably more on the left. And then watching the hind limbs, we can see that the right one has a shorter stance phase and the left one has to rush and take another step, and that explains the peculiarity of the shorter strides on the left limb and bigger strides on the right one, which is the lame limb. Now, as we change sides to go and assess the right one, there's a very interesting observation that I will separate and play it in slow motion to be able to see it. So if we look at the very first step that the groom is asking the horse to take, if he were to start trotting, that would be using the diagonal of the right hind and left fore. But of course that would be too painful, so the horse is reluctant, the groom keeps pushing, and the horse makes a small jump and then lands on the left fore, and the right hind lands at a later time on its own, after most of the weight has landed on the left forelimb of the horse, which gives us an explanation about the reduced shock absorption of the left shoulder. And I'll just freeze that moment for a minute to be able to see the landing of the left fore before the right hind. We see it there. But let's continue with the analysis of the right side. So let's start from the head and neck, which is held a bit high and stiff. The thoracic spine is also stiff. And we can see the tension on the paraspinal muscles over the thoracic and the lumbar spine, and also the spinous processes in the thoracic spine pointing towards the right as the whole spine has rotated to the left. The lumbar spine swinging and rotating, trying to accommodate some of the movement created by the power of the hind limbs. And then we see the hind limbs moving. We see the right one with the overextension of the fetlock during the stance phase. The fetlock is almost touching the ground, and then the shorter stride on the left hind, because the right hind doesn't have the power to propel the horse forward.